What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you like this video. This is The Secrets of the Chippendale Murders, Season 1, Episode 4. So, we left off at the end of the last episode with the epiphany that Strawberry went to the FBI and told them this crazy story about some guy who wanted him to go over to England and kill some dancers with some cyanide, right? That's what had happened. And when they found out, well, who did that? His name was Ray. So then they talked to Ray, and they're like, Ray, what in the world? What is going on? What are you talking about? What is this whole situation that had happened with going over to England and killing some dancers? And so Ray Cologne, he gives it up, okay? He gives it up to the FBI, and what we find out is Steve Banerjee wanted, he specifically targeted Adonis because Adonis was made up of former dancers, right? So these are two dancers who left Chippendales to start their own review. And so Steve felt some kind of way. He was like, how dare you work for me, leave me, and then you want to start your own thing that basically, mimics what I got going on? No, I have a problem with that. So that is where the assassination plot came in. Now, the reason why they was going to use cyanide pills instead of other types of weapons is because you couldn't have guns in England. I don't know if they meant like you couldn't fly to England with a gun or you couldn't legally. I don't know. But they didn't want to fool with guns over in England. And so that is where the cyanide came in. Now, we remember from last week that Strawberry got cold feet. And he was like, this is more than what I bargained for. This ain't really what I signed up for. So let me go on over here to the FBI and let the FBI know what's going on. So Ray, he talking to the FBI. So he tells the FBI about the failed assassination attempt over in England and why that happened and the fact that Steve was in on it. So then the police were like, okay, well, or the FBI was like, okay, well, we need more because for right now, all we excuse me, right now all we have is you. So you the one that's getting ready to go to jail because that's all we got is you. So they said, okay, well, me and Steve have known each other since go way back to the first club that he owned. Remember, Steve had owned a club, his first club, it was like a little discotheque, and then he bought a new club, it was bigger, and he was renovating it, and that's when he changed the name to Chippendales. So he knew Ray, or Ray knew Steve, going all the way back to the first club. Now, he says the first interaction that he had with Steve in reference to doing anything nefarious was there was this club that had opened up. This club, Oscos. And this club had opened up, and it was their competition. Like, they had a line out the door every night. They were packing people in. Now, mind you, Steve's club was still doing well, but this already lets you know the type of mentality that Steve has about always having to be not just the best one, but the only one. So he talked to Ray, and he convinced Ray to go and try to burn down the club. Now, Ray and some of his boys, they got together. They got some Molotov cocktails. They threw them at the club. Listen, ain't nothing happened. A little bit of fire damage, but the club still opened up that night. So then there was another bar called the Red Onion. Same thing. Steve was, felt some kind of way that the Red Onion was opening and doing their thing, and he wanted them gone. And once again, he goes to Ray, and he gets Ray to try to set the club on fire, and once again, they bungle it. It doesn't happen. Nothing happens to the club. They, again, a little bit of damage, but it doesn't put the club out of business. So at this point, Ray is like, y'all are good for nothing. Like, y'all were supposed to be burning this club down, and y'all are good for nothing. Now, a couple of years go by, and 1985 rolls around, and Steve is... What had happened was with Steve and Nick, it wasn't this napkin promise that like Steve wasn't happy about the napkin. Remember, I told you guys about that part where they had this unofficial contract. Well, it was an official contract, but it was on a piece of napkin that gave Nick the traveling rights to Chippendales, and so he was making money off of the tours. Steve was still making good money off of the clubs, but he felt some kind of way about the fact that he had to pay Nick for the traveling show. But that's not what did it. What we found out was Nick was tired of having to split his profits off the clubs with Steve. And so Nick is going to start his own mail review, and he's calling it U.S. Mail, M-A-L-E. And we saw the press clippings. They started putting together a calendar. Like, he was going to totally cut Steve out, and he was going to do his own thing. And the reality of the situation is, Nick probably would have ended up being more popular, and he might have actually ended up putting Chippendales out of business, because we know that the charisma, the face, all of the ideas that when it comes to certain things came from Nick. If you go back to the first club, Chippendales in the beginning was really just a hole in the ground kind of club where guys came off the street and basically stripped. Nick turned it into a whole production, right? We know that. So when Steve got wind that Nick was going to actually leave altogether and take the idea and start his own thing, that is when Steve decided, I got to get rid of Nick. So here's where it gets stupid, y'all. Steve ended up calling Ray again, the same dude that screwed up the first time and the second time when you wanted him to burn down the club. And then that is who you decided to go to when you wanted to get rid of your business partner. But that's what he did. So Ray also went to the same person who he said was a heroin addict, named Louis, went to him to get him. That's the same guy that he worked with that was supposed to be burning the club down, and they ain't burned down nothing. He went to him. So Steve he told him he needed what Steve needed. He said, I'll do it for $25,000. Now Ray was like, I thought that was a little expensive, but when I took it back to Steve said, I'll pay it. So not only did he pay $25,000, he gave him $500 for the gun, and of course he paid all of the expenses, whatever. So Ray said he went to go pick Louis up that night for them to get on their flight, and Louis is at the guy they bought the gun from, his mother's house doing his laundry. Y'all, I couldn't make this stuff up. I really couldn't make this stuff up. So they pick him up, they go to the airport, but before they go to the airport, Louis is like, listen, I gotta get high. I need my dope before I get on this plane, and I gotta be high. Now, on one hand, I understand, because in order for you to wrap your brain around the fact that you're about to go get on a plane, fly across the country to go kill somebody, I guess you do need to be high. But that probably for most people would be, a red flag. Not for Ray. So they get on the plane, they use fake names, because again, remember, back then, TSA and all of that, it isn't what it is today. You ain't have to show all the ID that you got to show today to get on the plane. So they use fake names and all that good stuff. So they get on the plane, they fly to New York. Steve gives them the address of where the offices are and everything. They get ready to go to the offices, and they realize, wait a minute, we don't even know if Nick is there. So they stop at a payphone to call Nick to get him on the phone. So he answers the phone, he's there, and they pretend like that, they want to dance, that they're dancers and they want to, audition for Chippendales. So he's like, oh, come on over, I'll be here, excuse me, you can dance for me. So they get to the office, and that's where Louis goes up. And if you remember, when Louis got off the elevator, he ran into William Lott first and said, are you Nick? And he was like, no, Nick is in the office over there. So he ends up taking Nick. So he ends up going into the office, and, we know the rest. He shot Nick, yada, yada, yada. So here's the reality of the situation. Everybody got away with it. The FBI suspected, at first they didn't suspect Steve at all. But after a while, the FBI started suspecting, but they had no concrete proof. Steve, if you had just walked away and left everything alone, you'd have been all right. But nah, you decided you wanted to put hits out on dancers over in Europe and stuff. Anyway, so Ray is telling this whole story because remember, Ray is trying to get out of his charges. So once he gives the police a murder that they haven't solved in New York, then it's like, oh, ding, 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 you win the prize. Now, this is enough for your get out of jail free card, or at the very least, some minimal time, right? But we need some corroboration. So now they wire Ray up, and they get him to go talk to Louis. Now, mind you, at this point, it has been 5 years. They have not talked to each other in the 5 years that this happened. Louis is in jail. So Ray has to get to know him again and build up his trust. He's calling him in jail or getting him to call him in jail. He actually goes to visit him, and when he goes to visit him in jail, he gets Louis to talk enough about the murder to incriminate himself enough for the FBI to be like, okay, cool. Now they got Louis. They charged Louis with murder and everything. Now it was time to get Steve. Now, Steve might have been a lot of things, but Steve wasn't stupid. And Steve wasn't touching no parts of a conversation on the phone about this murder. Ray convinces Steve that he's out on bail because he knew he had gone to jail. He's out on bail because he's got medical issues and that he's just on house arrest, but he's getting ready to skip bail. And so Steve, he said, I'm going over to Switzerland. I need to talk to you. I really need to talk to you. So he convinces Steve to fly over to Zurich to meet him to have a conversation. Now, in Steve's mind, he knew that it wasn't safe to talk on the phones. He even knew that it wasn't really safe to talk in person in the United States. Now, what invisible wall he thought he flew through that protected him from being charged with murder in the United States just because he said it so in another country, I will never know. But he did. He thought that being in Switzerland, hey, it's Switzerland, we're, neutral, whatever. So he meets Ray, and at first he's very cautious, and he's like, oh man, the FBI's been following me. They probably listening right now. They probably on the other side of the walls. The funny thing is they were. They had that whole room wired, and they absolutely were on the other side of the wall. But of course, Ray plays it off. He was like, what? Nobody's thinking about us. Ain't nobody over there. Da-da-da-da-da. And baby, by the end of the night, Steve spills all of it. They got him on tape admitting to everything. Right? Everything. They even have him on tape admitting to stuff that the police didn't even know he had done. We'll get to that at the end. So now they charge Steve with murder. And he ends up making a deal with the FBI, where he was going to serve however many years he was going to serve, and then he was going to sign over Chippendales, his ownership of Chippendales, to the U.S. government. Now, that was weird to me. I mean, again, I don't study court cases like that. I'm not an attorney, so I'm sure it's happened before. I'm sure there's precedent for that. But I just thought that was really weird that he was going to sign over his business to the government. Like, so what, the government going to make money off of Chippendales? Like, that was crazy to me. But the day before he was supposed to go in for his sentencing, he actually took care of it himself, and he unalived himself. I got to say it like that. So, of course, everybody now is like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, this is what he did. He's never going to serve time. He basically took care of it himself. But here, you would think it's over. It's not. The question now becomes, where's the money? Because we know that Steve was making millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it was a cash business. We know that he was flying back and forth to Switzerland, and he had Swiss accounts. We know that. That was already talked about. That was already well known. Now his son is like, listen, we thought, where's all the money? Nick was gone. My dad was the sole owner, proprietor of the business. He was making all the money, but there was no money. Well, come to find out, Nick DeNoya's family ended up suing Steve Banerjee's family for wrongful death, and they won a $36 million settlement. But when the lawyers went to go pull the money out the accounts, baby, there wasn't no money. Now, Steve's wife died of cancer a few years after the court case was settled, and the son feels like it really was directly related to everything that happened with this case, the stress, everything that went down with the case. The son said, listen, ain't no money. I don't know where the money is. I don't know where the money was supposed to be. Now, the government employed, or whoever, employed some forensic accountants to try to find the money. And they were able to trace the money to Switzerland. But once they got there, the case went cold. So what they don't know is where the money is to this day. They don't know where the money is. They don't know where the accounts are. They don't know whose name the accounts are in. The closest they've come is that there was a pilot that was a well-known friend of Steve's that allegedly would fly the money back and forth to Switzerland. Now, maybe the money was in his name. I don't know. This is what we don't know. Now Steve did have 2 children, and they think that Steve probably felt like he left his kids taken care of because of the fact that he was pulling the money. And they said they felt like Steve knew that the end was coming because he did pull money out of his bank accounts and stuff like that. So what that says to me is a couple of things. Either one, somebody lying and they know where the money is, but they smart enough to just live under the radar. They're not out here balling, buying up expensive things and living an extravagant lifestyle. That's the first option, which I don't think that's necessarily the case because I don't think his 2 kids would be smart enough to play low key for this long period of time. Maybe his wife, but I don't know about the churn because kids are young and dumb, and you put a bunch of money in their hand and they're gonna do it. The second option is Steve was double crossed. The person that he trusted to take the money to Switzerland and to make sure that his family would be taken care of, the minute Steve was gone, double crossed him, and him or her got all that money. The third option is Steve was so damn smart that he outsmarted himself, and that money is sitting somewhere in a Swiss bank account waiting for somebody to come and find it. Because what we do know about Swiss bank accounts is that the Swiss are very, very, very cautious, and it takes a lot. If you don't have the right information, the passcodes, the password, the name of the account, all that good stuff, it would take like an act of God for you to access anything in those accounts. We've seen it happen over the years where the Swiss don't play, and that's why people take their money over there for that exact reason, because of how protected they are over their accounts and their money in the bank. Personally, my vote is for option number 3. I think that money's still sitting somewhere. It was just too much money. And I think, again, I feel like if anybody that was that close to Steve was living a lifestyle on that level, I feel like the police would have already, because they talked to the pilot or the person that they think was the pilot, the police would have already investigated him. They would have already audited him, looked at how he was living, paid attention to his lifestyle. And I feel like they would have done that for anybody that was anywhere in Steve's close circle. Because, again, that kind of money, I mean, we're talking about, they feel like it was hundreds of millions of dollars. That kind of money, most people can't sit on. Most people just can't sit on it. You're going to give yourself away. You're going to go buy you a new whatever, something. Something is going to tip your hand. I think that the money is in some account somewhere, and either his family hasn't figured it out yet, or his family has figured it out, but they know that the heat is on, there's that judgment and all of that good stuff, and maybe they're not touching it. I don't know. But my vote is that the money is sitting somewhere. I don't know. Y'all tell me what y'all think. Now, here's what was interesting, and here's what we found out after the fact. Like I said, the government didn't even halfway touch how bad things were with Steve. On top of the fact that Steve tried to burn down 2 clubs, kill his business partner, tried to assassinate 2 other people that chose to no longer be a part of his organization and start their own organization. We also found out that he had a man by the name of Richard Bash on his hit list. Now, Richard Bash, was a former MC for him when he was still in LA, and he ended up suing Steve for a whole lot of money after Steve fired him, and he felt like he was owed some sort of compensation. Then there was another man that was on his hit list, a man by the name of Jim Nelson. Now, Jim Nelson was a black man who Steve refused to allow him to come into the club. And so Jim Nelson actually filed a lawsuit against Steve and reported him to the liquor board, where Steve did lose and had to pay Jim. So Jim was on the hit list too. Then there was Dan Patterson. Now, Dan Patterson was a dancer as well, who also struck out on his own and created his own calendar outside of Chippendales and did some other things. And they said that while he was on the photo shoot for his calendar, somebody actually did shoot at them. Now, they believe that it was Steve that was kind of just throwing out some warning shots, that he wasn't really trying to actually kill nobody, but basically trying to let people know, listen, I see you and I see what you're doing and you need to chill out. So it sounds like Steve was just very insecure and so afraid and so egotistical that nobody could do anything that was closely related to what he had going on, because it wasn't about the money. We also found out that he had a whole escape plan, that he was going to go back to India and live amongst the people, because he felt like the government was closing in. So he definitely was paranoid about that. So listen, I think that's the final episode. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what else they can tell us unless there's some updates to the case. But I feel like that was the last episode because we have the beginning, the middle, and we definitely got the end. Y'all let me know what y'all think though. Drop it in the comments. Peace.